Today we begin the story of Napoleon's life. You are born in 1769, on a craggy, wind-whipped island floating between Italy and France, Corsica, recently absorbed into the French kingdom like a last-minute guest at a party no one really wanted to invite. Your name is Napoleon di Bonaparte, which sounds definitively Italian, and your family is nobility in the same way a dented espresso machine is a noble appliance, technically, but barely. Your father, Carlo, is a lawyer who knows how to navigate the tides of political change. He pledges allegiance to France not long after they gobble up Corsica. Opportunistic? Sure. Necessary? Absolutely. You grow up among goats, vendettas, and the lingering smell of burnt bread from the neighbors' wood stoves. You're not exactly the most popular kid. You're moody. You read too much. You glare. You hate France, but then again, you also dream about conquering it. At age 9, you leave your home island to attend military school in the snowy town of Brienne-le-Château. There, you are a scholarship student surrounded by rich, snooty French aristocrats who make fun of your accent, your clothes, your height, your name, and possibly your sandwich choices. You learn early to hide your feelings and sharpen your mind. When the other boys are playing card games, you're in a corner memorizing Caesar's campaigns. Your notebooks are filled with strange diagrams, made-up maps, and poorly sketched fortifications. It's cute and unsettling, like watching a squirrel plan a siege. At Brienne, life is a mixture of humiliation and obsession. You dream of artillery calculations and become a master at math, because guns are the great equalizers, and cannonballs don't care about your accent. You graduate to the École Militaire in Paris, the big leagues. Your dad dies around this time, leaving your mother Letizia, an iron-willed woman with the emotional range of a marble statue, in charge of the family. She tightens belts and expectations. You skip meals, not by choice, and grow up skinny and full of fury. A weird combo, but you make it work. You graduate at 16 as a second lieutenant of artillery, assigned to a regiment where your Corsican bitterness and encyclopedic knowledge of explosives make you an odd but efficient officer. You wander France like a lonely chess piece, stationed in places with names nobody remembers and full of people who mostly ignore you. You write political pamphlets no one reads. You try to start revolts back home in Corsica that fizzle out like cheap fireworks. You even get arrested once. But then comes 1789. The French Revolution. The entire country catches fire with ideas, liberty, equality, fraternity, and also lots of screaming. Heads are falling, wigs are flying, and every rank and structure you studied is either gone or bleeding out in a gutter. It's horrifying. It's magnificent. It's your chance. Suddenly, being a minor noble isn't a death sentence. Because you're Corsican, so you're exotic, but also French enough to pass. You get promoted quickly, mostly because the old officers are fleeing, hiding, or dead. You write more political tracts, slightly less unread this time, and align yourself with the Jacobins, the more radical bunch. You admire Robespierre, the guy who gives liberty a terrifying side eye. He's like the manager of a very bloody HR department. But let's pause for a moment and appreciate a quirky detail. While all this is happening, you still speak French with an absolutely awful Corsican accent. Your spelling is atrocious. Your handwriting is a crime. When you dictate letters, the secretaries sometimes pause just to silently scream. And you hate Paris. Its parties, its snobs, its pastries that cost more than an officer's daily pay. You prefer simplicity, strategy, and the smell of gunpowder to perfume. Still, you adapt. You play the game. You charm, or at least you act like you're charming, and people start noticing that despite your awkwardness, there's a storm forming behind your eyes. You keep climbing the ranks. Slowly. Determinedly. You're like that weird app no one downloads until it suddenly becomes mandatory. Your career hangs by a thread more than once. After Robespierre is guillotined, being associated with him is like showing up to brunch with a skunk. You're briefly arrested again. You write sad poetry. No, seriously, you write bad poetry. Lines about fate and lonely cliffs and blood-colored sunsets. You're a teenage Tumblr blog in human form, but somehow still manage to get back into military favor. You're 24, with a tired mother, too many siblings, and a chip on your shoulder the size of a cannon. France is falling apart, again, but you're still convinced that this entire imploding empire might just be your playground. You're waiting for the right moment to rise, and it's getting close. You don't have friends, exactly, just people who will someday claim they always believed in you. You don't love anyone deeply yet, except perhaps the dream of history remembering your name. One last oddity. Your fellow officers sometimes catch you staring at maps like they're treasure chests. You don't just see borders, you see destinies. Every bend in a river, every mountain pass, every oddly shaped coastline, they whisper to you. Not like voices. More like invitations. You're not destined for greatness yet. You're a moody, half-starved artillery nerd with vague plans and aggressive body language. But you've survived poverty, exile, mockery, revolution, and French grammar. And that's not nothing. You've been waiting for your chance to matter, and now, in 1793, it comes wrapped in war smoke and bureaucratic chaos. France is fighting off half of Europe while also fighting itself, which is impressive, in a self-destructive teenager kind of way. Cities are rebelling, the British Navy is everywhere, and one such rebel city, Toulon, has invited the enemy in like a cat dragging in an open flame. Toulon is important. It's a massive naval port on the Mediterranean, and the British are lounging in its harbor like they've just booked an Airbnb for a long, smug vacation. The revolutionary government sends an army to recapture the city, but it's a disaster of committee-led confusion. No one can agree on what to do. Officers come and go. Cannons are misplaced, misfired, or just pointed at trees because someone misread a map. And into this mess you arrive. Napoleon Bonaparte, 24 years old, broke, intense, and still rocking that thick Corsican accent. You're technically in charge of artillery, which in this situation is like being given the keys to a car with no wheels and told to win a drag race. But this is where you shine. You study the terrain obsessively. You notice that if the French take control of certain hills, they can fire directly into the harbor and force the British to leave without even needing a full assault. It's obvious to you. It's not obvious to anyone else. You sketch the plan, argue for it, yell a little, and finally, someone listens. You get more cannons, dig trenches, and organize soldiers like chess pieces. You write letters with phrases like vital objective and geometric supremacy, which is a fancy way of saying, aim the cannon here, not at the goats. The night before the main assault, it rains. Soldiers slip in the mud. You've barely slept. When the French finally storm the forts under your direction, the noise is deafening. You're everywhere, shouting orders, dodging musket balls, possibly swearing in Italian. You get wounded in the leg, but the French retake Toulon. The British evacuate. Boom. Victory. And suddenly, you're a national hero. For about 6 hours. Because this is revolutionary France, and just as fast as you rise, you're dragged back down. Robespierre's people like you. But then Robespierre gets his head separated from his hopes, and your political connections become radioactive. You're tossed into a cell in Nice, wondering if your career and neck are both about to be permanently shortened. You don't die, but your career goes on ice. For months, you wander the military bureaucracy like a ghost. You write letters begging for command. You think about going to the Ottoman Empire. You even flirt with becoming a teacher in some backwater post, which would have made for a truly weird timeline. Napoleon the bored math tutor, terrifying 10-year-olds with pop quizzes about geometry and siegecraft. But just when you're starting to lose hope, 1795 rolls around, and Paris decides to give you one more twist of fate. The government, known as the Directory now, Because France changes governments like socks, is under threat. Royalists are rising. Crowds are gathering. Barricades are forming. It's chaos again, just how you like it. A politician named Paul Barras remembers that moody little Corsican who did something with cannons once and calls you in. You're given vague orders to defend the Republic. Translation: make this go away. You survey the city, see the oncoming mob, and make a very unromantic decision. You line up artillery along key avenues, preload them with grape shot, basically shrapnel in a can, and wait. The rebels charge. You give the order. The cannons fire. It's loud, smoky, brutal, and short. The smell is like iron and burnt cloth. It's not a battle, it's a sneeze of violence. One moment there's a crowd, the next, there's silence and the distant sound of retreating fancy shoes. Later, this will be called the whiff of grape shot, a phrase that makes it sound like a delicate perfume rather than the moment you blasted several hundred monarchists off the streets like confetti. You've just saved the Republic. Again. And this time, it sticks. Barras rewards you with a promotion, Commander of the Army of the Interior. You get new clothes, new respect, and a modest apartment in Paris with a bidet and everything. You also get introduced to a woman named Josephine de Beauharnais, older, fashionable, widowed, and way out of your league. Naturally, you fall head over boots. You write her passionate letters while running military drills, obsess over her while inspecting troops, and generally act like a high-functioning romantic disaster. She doesn't seem very interested at first. She calls you Bonaparte, like she's talking about a decorative vase, but she eventually says yes when you propose. It's not clear whether it's love, politics, or just boredom, but you don't care. You're now climbing fast. But one little detail keeps bothering people: you're still incredibly young. In a room full of decorated veterans, you stand out like a boy at a retirement party. You walk like you've always got a plan, talk like you're already rewriting history, and when you look at France, you don't see borders, you see blueprints. At 26, you're promoted again, General-in-Chief of the Army of Italy. A job that sounds prestigious until you realize the army is underfed, underpaid, and wearing boots held together with string and optimism. Your orders are vague. Your resources are non-existent. But the fire's lit now. You're done with waiting. You've mastered the art of seeing opportunity in disaster. And soon, Europe's going to learn what a Corsican with a plan, and a few good cannons, can really do. You ride into Italy like a storm disguised as a man. It's 1796, and France hands you the Army of Italy like someone handing over a broken lawnmower and saying, "Fix it, preferably by conquering something." Your soldiers are exhausted, unpaid, and armed with more fleas than musket balls. Their boots flap when they march. Morale is so low it might as well be underground. But you ride at the front, shout big things about glory and the Republic, and somehow, incredibly, people start believing you. You take one look at the Austrian armies blocking your path and don't see a threat. You see math, angles, weak points, terrain. You move faster than anyone expects, splitting armies, flanking hills, crossing rivers nobody in their right mind would cross. Battles come fast: Montagnat, Lodi, Arcole, Rivoli. Each time, you're outnumbered or outgunned, and each time you win. You write your own bulletins afterward, of course, flamboyant little PR bombs that explode in every Paris café by morning. General Bonaparte defeats 40,000 Austrians with 2 baguettes and a loud voice. That kind of thing. Italy doesn't know what hit it. The Austrians are reeling. French flags are suddenly sprouting all over the north like imperial mushrooms. You enter Milan like a rock star, except with dirtier boots and significantly more artillery. You don't just take cities. You rearrange them. Local rulers fall. French administrators arrive. You plunder a few priceless paintings, naturally, For the glory of France, of course, not because your walls are bare. And yet, despite all the glory, you stay restless. You send letters to Paris that are half brag, half hint. You want more. Italy is too small now. Europe's not enough. You want to make history remember your name in a different way. So in 1798, you pitch something weird. Egypt. Yes, Egypt. You sell it as a way to disrupt British trade with India, because Britain is that annoying rich neighbor with loud parties and an indestructible garden. But also, deep down, Egypt is about glory. You want to be Alexander the Great, but with better boots and slightly fewer statues of yourself already built. The Directory, tired of your ambition and secretly terrified of you, says yes. Which is like handing a shark a map to the beach. You gather 35,000 troops, a fleet of ships, and because you're Napoleon, a team of 160 scientists, artists, engineers, and scholars. It's a military invasion and a science fair. The troops call them the donkeys of the Republic. You just call it preparation. The journey to Egypt is long, hot, and filled with arguments about water, insects, and why the bread keeps melting. You land near Alexandria and immediately launch into battle against the Mamluks, who are flashy horsemen with swords longer than your marriage vows. At the Battle of the Pyramids, you arrange your men into massive squares, walls of bayonets facing out like metallic porcupines, and the Mamluk cavalry shatters against them like waves hitting a rock. You win. Cairo falls. You move in. And for a moment, you believe you've actually done it. You've become a new kind of conqueror. You even try to learn Arabic, you fail, declare respect for Islam, nobody believes you, and build bridges, schools, and roads. Egypt, in your mind, is a blank page ready for your ink. But then reality laughs. The British, led by Admiral Horatio Nelson, who's basically you, but wetter, find your fleet anchored in Abu Qir Bay. And they destroy it. Burn it to splinters. The Battle of the Nile turns your grand expedition into a landlocked science experiment. Your army is now stuck in a country that's increasingly confused about whether you're a liberator or just a very polite invader who keeps stealing their papyrus. Then things get weird. Plagues break out. You get a skin infection that won't go away. There's a battle near Nazareth that you win, but only after discovering that camels are not the noble steeds you imagined. They bite, they spit, and they hold grudges. You lay siege to Acre, a tiny coastal city that refuses to fall no matter how many times you scream at it. Meanwhile, your letters to Josephine go unanswered, or worse, answered in cold, vaguely floral tones. Word reaches you that she's been less than faithful while you were off rebranding ancient civilizations. You are furious. You throw yourself into battle. You write angsty poetry again. Your officers quietly burn it before it spreads morale damage. Eventually, you give up on Acre. It's your first real failure. It stings. You retreat into the desert sun, and for the first time, you look tired. But back in France, things are collapsing, again. The government is weak, the economy's failing, and royalists are sniffing around like mold in a bakery. You realize something important. History is calling, and you're stuck in the sand. So, in classic Napoleon fashion, you do the unthinkable. You abandon your army. You hop on the fastest ship you can find and sneak back to France under cover of darkness, leaving behind thousands of confused soldiers and some very angry camels. It's not your proudest moment, but it might be your smartest. Because when you return to Paris, you're not seen as a failed explorer. You're seen as a returning hero. Your bulletins had done their work. The pyramids, the battles, the mystique, it all fed into the image. You hadn't conquered Egypt, but you'd conquered attention. And in revolutionary France, that's almost better. You're 30 years old. Your uniform fits better. Your hairline's still hanging on. And when people say your name now, they don't say, "That Corsican guy." They say, "The General." You've been reshaping maps. Now you're going to reshape the government. Because sandstorms were just a warm-up. The moment your boots hit Paris soil in 1799, you feel it. France is wobbling again, like a rickety chandelier held together with chewing gum and Rousseau quotes. The government, the Directory, is a mess. Corruption, infighting, inflation, and famine all swirl into a cocktail of political rot. People are tired. Tired of chaos, tired of waiting, tired of leaders who look like they were picked from a clearance rack. So, naturally, they look to you. You walk through Paris with a kind of silent thunder. Everyone notices. You're tan from Egypt, scarred from battles, and carry that now famous squint like you're always 5 seconds away from conquering the furniture. Politicians whisper. Generals offer wine. Ladies swoon. Enemies panic. Your myth has gotten ahead of your reality, and you're smart enough not to correct it. You reconnect with a few powerful people. Emmanuel Size, one of those brainy revolutionaries who helped invent the Republic, wants change. He wants to fix the system. You smile, nod, and think sure, let's fix it, by replacing it. Size thinks you're going to be his muscle. You're thinking, I'm going to be the whole skeleton. The plan? A coup. A neat little overthrow. No guillotines, ideally. Just a nice, quiet shift of power, involving bayonets, forged documents, and a lot of dramatic shouting. On November 9, 1799, 18 Brumaire, by the weird French calendar that makes everyone sound like a weather report, you make your move. You walk into the chambers of power surrounded by soldiers and spin a tale of threats to the Republic. Senators blink. Some gasp. One faints, because you're Napoleon and even fainting seems poetic around you. The plan starts to wobble. Someone shouts, "Down with the tyrant!" You panic for a hot second, then remember, you have soldiers. Real ones. With guns. And that's the thing about revolutions, they're romantic until someone walks in with actual authority. The Directory dissolves. Size realizes he's been outmaneuvered like a bishop on a checkered board. You establish a new government, the consulate. It sounds classy, even diplomatic. It's actually just you with a few backup singers. You name yourself first consul. Not king. Not dictator. Just first. Modest, right? And here's the kicker, the people love it. You stabilize the currency. You reform the tax system. You sign peace with Austria, at least for a bit. You even reconcile with the Catholic Church in 1801 through the Concordat, basically a truce that says, you keep the religion, I keep the power. You fund schools, rework the legal system, and start creating something called the Napoleonic Code, which is law but with personality. It's still studied today, because you're not just playing chess anymore. You're rewriting the rulebook. But behind every reform is control. Every vote is managed. Every newspaper knows better than to criticize you. You introduce something called a plebiscite, which is French for yes or very yes. The people approve of everything you do. Miraculously. Josephine is back in the picture too. You've forgiven her, sort of. She's still charming, fashionable, and slightly confusing. You try to make the marriage work. She throws parties. You throw paperwork. You're an odd couple, but it keeps Paris talking. Yet ambition itches at you like a collar that's always too tight. Being first consul isn't enough. Titles are masks, and you want something that says what everyone already knows: you're in charge. So you do what no revolutionary has dared: you crown yourself. It's 1804. You arrange a coronation in Notre Dame Cathedral, complete with robes, music, and a pope imported from Rome like divine seasoning. Pope Pius VII is supposed to place the crown on your head, symbolizing that God, through the Church, grants you legitimacy. You take the crown from his hands and place it on your own head. A silent flex heard across Europe. You crown Josephine, too, because you're not completely heartless. But the message is loud and clear. You don't owe your power to anyone. Not God. Not the people. Not the revolution. You are the revolution now. Europe gasps. Monarchs squint in horror. England starts sweating through its powdered wig. And you, Napoleon Bonaparte, child of Corsican obscurity, are now Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. Let that settle for a second. The revolution had abolished monarchy. Heads rolled. Thrones fell. And yet here you are, in gold and velvet, with an eagle standard and a scepter shaped like Charlemagne's. You didn't just survive the revolution. You reverse-engineered it. But don't get too comfortable. Because power doesn't like being shared. And your throne? It sits at the center of a hornet's nest named Europe. You're already planning invasions. Britain's still untouchable at sea, so you draft plans for a cross-channel assault. You gather an army at Boulogne, complete with floating barges and breakfast menus. But Nelson's Royal Navy blocks every path. You fume. You pace. You build towers to watch the water, as if staring hard enough will part the channel like a biblical storm. Meanwhile, peace collapses again. Austria and Russia rejoin Britain in a new anti-French alliance. You shrug and prepare to meet them, not with diplomats, but with cannon and cavalry. In 1805 you march east. The Grande Armée, your newly organized megaforce, is the most modern army on Earth. Discipline, speed, esprit de corps, it's like a traveling thundercloud with uniforms. You march through Germany like it's a warm-up. The Austrians don't know what hit them. The Russians show up late and confused. And you? You deliver a masterpiece. The Battle of Austerlitz. One cold December morning, you bait your enemies into attacking your weak flank. It's all an illusion. A theatrical trap. The fog lifts, the sun glows gold across the frosty fields, and your army moves like clockwork dipped in musket smoke. By afternoon, you've crushed 2 empires in one blow. Back in Paris, it's celebration time. Paintings are commissioned. Coins are minted. Statues go up. The sun of Austerlitz becomes your halo. Europe blinks and wonders, what just happened? You don't just win battles. You compose them. By now, Europe isn't just afraid of you, they're exhausted by you. You're like a walking chessboard that keeps flipping the pieces when you lose a pawn. But you don't lose many. In 1806 and 1807, you keep moving east, pushing deeper into Prussia and Poland, as if your boots are allergic to French soil. At Jena and Auerstedt, you flatten the Prussian army like a flaky croissant under an anvil. They never stood a chance. Too slow, too old school, too fond of marching in straight lines. Your zigzags and surprise cavalry charges. The Prussians blink, and their capital, Berlin, is yours. You stroll in like you've always belonged, probably wondering where the best croissant shop is. Then comes Poland. Winter, mud, and misery. You dig in, because your next opponent is Russia. You fight the Russians at Ilo in the snow, and it's grim. Blood freezes before it hits the ground. The battle is technically a draw, but Russia feels it more than you do. By the time you meet them again at Friedland, your army dances through their ranks like a knife through butter. Tsar Alexander gets the message. You meet him on a raft in the middle of the Neman River, which is as dramatic and awkward as it sounds. You sit on a floating pavilion, trying to outsmile each other. He's young, charming, and a little starstruck. You, for once, play nice. The result? The treaties of Tilsit. Russia joins your club. Prussia is carved up like a roast. You're basically running continental Europe now, with one glaring exception. Britain. Always Britain. They just won't go away. You can't reach them by land, and your navy is a soggy punchline. So you go economic. The continental system. You announce that nobody on the continent is allowed to trade with Britain. No tea, no textiles, no fancy British toffee. It's a giant economic blockade, enforced by France and your satellite kingdoms. It's basically saying, if I can't have them, no one can. But here's the problem. Europe likes British goods. Smugglers pop up like mushrooms. Portugal refuses to cooperate. Spain gets twitchy. Russia begins to doubt you. And your system starts leaking like an old ship patched with baguette dough. Still, on the surface, you're golden. Back home, you're reforming society like you're building a Lego set with 40,000 tiny pieces. You introduce the Napoleonic code far and wide, equality before the law, civil rights, sort of, and no more feudal nonsense. Everyone has to carry ID cards now. The modern state is being born under your command, and your handwriting is all over the birth certificate. You've also turned family into foreign policy. Your siblings are now royalty. You hand out crowns like party favors. Joseph becomes King of Naples, then King of Holland. Jerome gets Westphalia, which sounds made up but is very real and very German. Elisa rules over Tuscany with enough grace to make everyone forget she's technically Corsican. It's the Bonaparte World Tour, and every throne comes with matching curtains and a stern letter from you explaining how not to mess it up. Of course, not everyone gets a happy ending. Your brother Lucien refuses to play along. He marries someone you didn't approve of. You exile him from your dinner parties and your empire. Family unity? Optional. Obedience? Mandatory. And then there's Josephine. It still hurts. She's glamorous, warm, unpredictable, like a candlelit salon and a thunderstorm all in one. But she can't give you an heir. That's the one thing you need most now. You're building a dynasty, not a fling. So you do the hardest thing yet, you divorce her. You make it official in a bizarrely public ceremony. Everyone cries. You say things about love and duty. Josephine weeps in a way that makes half the room fall in love with her. Then she vanishes to Malmaison, her country estate filled with roses and regret. You marry again. A political marriage, of course. You choose Marie-Louise of Austria, young, blonde, and extremely Habsburg. It's perfect. The Austrians had tried to kill you 5 times, but now they're family. That's diplomacy, Napoleonic style. In 1811, she gives birth to a son, your son, the King of Rome. The boy is barely breathing and already has more titles than teeth. You weep. You hold him like he's your future incarnate. For a moment, the empire seems eternal. But cracks are forming. Spain is your first real bruise. You install Joseph as king there, which goes down like putting pineapple on someone else's national dish. The Spanish rebel. And you're not fighting just armies now, you're fighting guerrillas. Farmers, priests, shoemakers with knives. The Peninsular War becomes a slow-bleeding wound, a nightmare of ambushes and assassinations and donkeys loaded with gunpowder. You call it the Spanish ulcer. It will never heal. To make things worse, the British show up, again. A guy named Wellington. He's clever, quiet, British to the core. He supports the Spanish, avoids direct battles, and slices through your troops like a cautious surgeon. Every mile you gain, you lose again. The Iberian Peninsula becomes your muddiest lesson. You can conquer land, but people? People fight back. And then there's Russia. You and Tsar Alexander had that lovely raft moment, remember? Yeah, that's dead now. He's had enough of the continental system. Russia's economy is tanking, and the Tsar is suddenly less interested in friendship and more into pine-scented independence. You decide, naturally, that this is unacceptable. So you prepare for your biggest move yet, invading Russia. You gather over 600,000 troops. The Grande Army swells with soldiers from every part of your empire, Poles, Germans, Italians, even reluctant Dutchmen. You call it a campaign to enforce order. Others call it madness. But you believe, still, that victory is inevitable. That the world just hasn't caught up to your genius yet. That when history closes its eyes, it dreams in blue uniforms and marching drums, and the echo of your name bouncing through the corridors of time. It begins with drums. Not just metaphorical ones. Actual drums, beating in the pre-dawn gloom of June 1812, as your Grand Army begins crossing the Niemen River into Russia. Over 600,000 soldiers march under your command. You are gambling everything: reputation, empire, even sanity. You say it's just a second Polish campaign, like this is some weekend hobby. But everyone knows it's bigger. You're trying to break a czar. The army stretches over hundreds of miles. Cannons, cavalry, field kitchens, opera singers, you bring half of Europe with you. On paper, it's glorious. On the ground, it's a logistical disaster wrapped in wool uniforms and ambition. You keep marching. Russians retreat. Towns are abandoned, crops burned. Scorched earth. You expected a battle. Instead, you get a haunted road show. Horses starve. Soldiers start melting into the forests. You write letters, demand a decisive engagement. The Tsar remains silent. You're chasing shadows. Finally, after 2 long months, a city appears on the horizon, Smolensk. But instead of surrendering, the Russians burn it. You take it anyway, like a charred trophy, and push forward. The army, thinner now, stumbles toward Moscow. That's the prize. That's the symbol. You need that one big, cinematic victory. And it comes, sort of. Borodino. It's brutal. One day. Over 70,000 casualties. It's not strategy anymore, it's meat grinder warfare. The battlefield becomes a smoking wound. You win. Technically. The Russians retreat again. You sigh, half victorious, half exhausted. The road to Moscow lies open. And then you reach it. Moscow, the Golden Crown. You expect fanfare. A formal surrender. Maybe a small chorus. Instead, silence. The city is empty. Abandoned. Like a theater with no actors. And then fire. Explosions echo through the night as Russian agents torch their own capital. Not out of madness, but out of defiance. You sit in the Kremlin, surrounded by smoke, ash, and the realization that you've conquered nothing. You send letters to the Tsar. He ignores you. Winter creeps in. Supplies vanish. Your men, already starved, begin to freeze. So you do what every brilliant commander dreads. You retreat. And the retreat is worse than the invasion. The cold doesn't just bite, it devours. Horses collapse. Men freeze upright, like statues carved from regret. Wolves circle. Villagers turn hostile. Bridges are blown, rivers clog with the dead. You cross the Berezina River in chaos, half drowning, half burning your own bridges just to survive. By the time you limp back into friendly territory, you've lost over 400,000 men. It's not just a defeat. It's an unraveling. The myth of Napoleon, the man who could not be beaten, freezes somewhere along a Russian road and never quite returns. Back in Paris, you try to spin it. Strategic retreat. Harsh winter. Sure. But Europe sees blood in the water. Your enemies regroup. Austria, Prussia, Russia, Britain, they form the Sixth Coalition. And this time, they mean it. You're still sharp. You raise another army, because apparently your manpower is as infinite as your self-confidence. In 1813, you meet them at Leipzig. It's the Battle of the Nations. It lives up to its name. Almost 600,000 troops clash over 4 days. It's vast, muddy, and deafening. You fight like a cornered tiger, desperate, vicious. But there are too many of them. Your allies start abandoning you. Saxons switch sides mid-battle. Your flags fall. You lose. And still you don't quit. Back in France you rally. Your enemies are closing in, crossing the Rhine, marching through your empire. But you command with the fury of a man who refuses to blink. In early 1814, you lead a brilliant 6-week campaign. Every move is textbook Napoleon: small forces, rapid strikes, impossible coordination. But brilliance isn't enough anymore. There are too many fronts. Too many deserters. Your empire, once stretched across the map like spilled ink, is shrinking into a puddle. And finally, Paris falls. You rush toward it, but not fast enough. The Allies march in. And in April 1814, your marshals, your closest commanders, your brothers in arms, they tell you it's over. You resist. You rage. You sob. You even consider one last stand. But in the end, you do the unthinkable. You abdicate. You sign the papers. You surrender your throne, not to an enemy, but to exhaustion. They send you into exile. Elba. A tiny Mediterranean island, shaped like a kidney bean and full of goats. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, master of Europe, are now the governor of goats. You arrive with a small entourage, a few hundred men, and a bunch of titles that don't mean anything anymore. You build roads, reform local trade, even introduce a new flag. You're still Napoleon after all. But every morning, you wake up and remember, you were the emperor. And now you're just a memory waiting to fade. Until, one day, a whisper reaches you. France is restless. The Bourbon king they installed, Louis XVIII, sits like an overfed librarian on your throne. The people grumble. The army misses you. The tricolor still flutters in hidden corners. And then you decide, one more gamble. You slip away from Elba in February 1815 with just 1,000 men and a heart full of unfinished business. You sail toward France. And the moment your boots hit the sand at Golfe-Juan, the world stops breathing. You're back. You return not with a roar but a ripple. February 1815. The beaches are empty. No cheering crowds. Just wind, salt spray, and your old uniform, dusty blue, worn tight, still fitting like ambition. You land at Golfe-Juan with barely 1,000 men and not a single cannon. It looks like a joke. It's not. You begin marching north. At first, people gawk. Some throw rocks. But others remember. Farmers, veterans, students, eyes widen, fists rise. Town after town joins you. The king sends troops to stop you. The soldiers arrive, see you, hesitate. You walk forward, open your coat, point to your chest and say, "If you want to kill your emperor, here I am." They don't shoot. They cheer. The Bourbon king flees without even finishing his wine. And just like that, you're in Paris again. Back on the throne. Back in the saddle. The 100 days begin. You work fast. Reforms, proclamations, new uniforms, old loyalties. You don't pretend the empire is back, it's not. But the spirit? That electric crackle that once ran from Paris to Cairo? That's back. Europe, of course, panics like someone just yelled, "Napoleon," in a crowded theater. The Seventh Coalition forms before your hat even gets unpacked. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, everyone. They're done playing. You have one shot. So you march north again. Your plan? Hit them before they unite. It almost works. You head for Belgium. You move quickly, classic Napoleon. Divide and conquer, shake their nerves before they find their footing. You beat the Prussians at Ligny. Not a knockout, but they fall back. That's your cue. You wheel west toward a place called Waterloo. Small town. Big destiny. June 18th, 1815. Rain all night. Mud thick as gravy. You wake early. Eat lightly. Walk the lines. Your men still adore you, even now. Especially now. You see it in their eyes, they'll die for you. Again. Across the ridge, the Duke of Wellington waits. British troops, Dutch allies, solid lines of red-coated patients. He's calm, calculating. A wall in human form. You wait for the ground to dry. That small delay, maybe an hour, becomes history's sharpest hinge. The battle is brutal. Cannonballs fly. Cavalry charges thunder. You unleash the Imperial Guard late in the day, your final, golden hammer, but it shatters against the ridge. Wellington doesn't break. Then the Prussians arrive. Remember Ligny? They didn't stay beaten. They come thundering in from the east, slamming into your flank. You watch your lines buckle, not with cowardice, but with exhaustion. Too many days. Too many miles. Too many ghosts. The French begin to fall back. Then they run. Your army disintegrates. You shout, gesture, ride forward, trying to unloose what's already lost. It's over by nightfall. You retreat. Hunted. Hiding. Not by your enemies, but by your own silence. You return to Paris, not as a hero, but a ghost wearing medals. You abdicate again. This time there's no illusion. No coronation in your back pocket. No plan C. They capture you. You request asylum in Britain, hoping maybe they'll let you live in a nice country manor near a pond. They laugh, politely, and ship you far, far away. St. Helena. A volcanic rock in the South Atlantic, 1,200 miles from anywhere people care about. The island smells like damp moss and boredom. No salons. No opera. Just wind and a few British guards who hate you, admire you, or both. They house you in Longwood, which sounds elegant but is basically Molden house form. You pace. You dictate your memoirs. You eat too much beef. You complain about the wallpaper. Really, you do. You gain weight. You lose sleep. You argue with your jailers over honor, etiquette, the proper way to serve tea. Time becomes strange. You, who once danced across empires, are now measuring afternoons in teaspoons and rainfall. Occasionally, ships pass in the distance, tiny and free. They never stop. You think of your son, the King of Rome, growing up in Vienna, far from your name, your shadow. You wonder if he'll ever truly know you. If anyone will. You fall ill. Your stomach aches. Rumors fly, cancer, poison, despair. It hardly matters. On May 5, 1821, the end comes quietly. You're only 51. A comet burned too hot. They bury you beneath the willow trees. Later they'll move your body to Paris. But here, for now, you sleep under the endless sky, in an empire of silence and salt air. And now you're gone. But not really. Because the moment your body cools beneath St. Helena's fog, the world begins to remember you. The man they once cursed, feared, and exiled? He starts turning into legend. You're no longer just Napoleon, the guy who ran out of luck in the mud of Waterloo. You become something bigger. A myth. A cautionary tale. A spark. France, that fickle lover, mourns you like a tragic hero. People begin whispering that you were misunderstood. Brilliant. Too far ahead of your time. Too much for the world to hold. Within weeks, there are busts of your face in secret corners of Paris. They sell tiny medals stamped with your silhouette. Children are named after you. And slowly, the world starts rearranging its story. Because what you did wasn't small. You didn't just fight battles, you rewrote how they were fought. You turned maps into origami. You shattered monarchies, then replaced them with dreams stitched in red, white, and blue. You introduced law codes that still live in courtrooms today. You made soldiers into citizens. You spoke to people not as pawns but as a people, with pride, with ambition, with fire. They feared you because you reminded them of what power could really look like. Not born into, but seized. And yes, there was ego. Rivers of it. You crowned yourself, literally. You sent hundreds of thousands to their deaths. You obsessed over legacy, over symbols, over your own myth. You weren't a saint. But saints don't break the world open like an eggshell. You were something else. And as the decades pass, the dust settles over the battlefields, but your name remains. Engraved on arches, stitched into songs, whispered by revolutionaries who want to rise just like you once did. In 1840, your body is returned to France in a solemn, dramatic procession. Paris shuts down to welcome you home. They place you in a tomb beneath the dome of Les Invalides, huge, dark, majestic. Fitting. You rest there still, surrounded by war trophies and marble eagles. And the world keeps debating, were you a genius? A tyrant? A hero? A monster? You don't answer, of course. Dead men rarely argue. But your silence roars through the centuries louder than any speech. Some call you the last great Roman. Others, the first modern dictator. Historians keep digging, scratching, writing. They never agree. And yet, they can't look away. Because deep down, everyone knows, history doesn't remember quiet men. It remembers those who shook the ground. And you? You were an earthquake in human form. As the story slows, we let the battlefield fade. We step back from the marble tomb, the thrones, the cannon smoke. The voices quiet. The uniforms disappear into fog. Now, just the ocean. St. Helena again. It's night. The wind presses softly against the shutters of Longwood. Inside, a single candle flickers, still burning. Not for empire. Not for conquest. Just memory. You walk alone now, not across Europe, but through the shadow of your own life. Past echoes of horses, of drums, of Josephine's perfume in a mirrored hallway. The laughter of soldiers by a fire. The cold silence of Moscow. The cries of your son, somewhere far away. There is peace now. No orders to give. No more maps to redraw. Just the soft hush of the sea and the pulse of time breathing around your name. And if anyone still listens for your footsteps, they come quietly. Like a whisper through a marble dome.